Я предлагаю честно, открыто потыкать этот новый подход прям с разных сторон, попробовать.
Let's try to poke at this new approach from various sides, whether it carries or maybe it does not carry any added value. And if we actually think it does, I'd like to. If it actually think it does, I'd like to understand whether the right approach would be something we are comfortable with. Because we're talking about business continuity issues, something that may stop the company from operating. And I mean, everyone would be in favor of doing something that will not allow that to happen. However, the approach is debatable because we can check certain things, but some other things you can only model. You can only talk to the management who are responsible for the process and think of a response plan. But you can start with modeling, and you can complement this modeling with practical tests. So let's start at a high level. Any visions, any opinions on this approach? The key thing, do you see any added value here?
Ну, на самом деле, то, что сказала Ира, наверное, если мы говорим...
Well, what Irina said, if we're talking about BCP, DRP practices that have been with us for decades, these practices go hand in hand with what you've talked about. You're not, consultants, you're practitioners. You live in the real world, and your approaches are born of your real-world practice. DCP, for example, if we're talking about companies for whom business continuity is key, the Moscow Stock Exchange, for example. So the stock exchange should work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if on Sunday there is an internet shutdown, or if, for example, the data center is flooded. We have seen the pandemic, we have seen a lot of other things that can shut down a company. So you have to be very careful about how to choose the risk areas, the red flags. Our ministries, even governments, use this bug bounty approach. I mean, government systems supported by Rostelecom actually announce bug bounties to test those systems, for example, ahead of elections or in other critical moments. However, systems that carry confidential information like medical information, personal data, I may be mistaken here, colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see any additional stimulus for anyone to try to break into them, because everybody tries to break into them. Anyway. I don't see such a stimulus. So, one other thing, how you define the inadmissible event. IT guys also talk about a single point of failure. You may say that we can't allow the internet to shut down, or you can do something to make sure that this event, even if it materializes, is mitigated. If you look at any modern IT infrastructure, for example, we store our customers' medical data, and we want to get protected from not just someone embezzling this data, but actually losing this data in any way. So the first idea is backing up those data. But in reality, you have a lot of layers there. You have a database layer, backup there. You have virtualization. You make dumps of virtual machines. Then you have two data centers, two servers. So even if a bad actor, for example, wipes off the entire database, there are a lot of factors that will allow you to mitigate the event as it is, because you mitigate part of that risk at every layer. And this, I think, is also a very good approach. IT may be a little bit longer into that story than InfoSec. But what I've seen in conferences, IT guys came to business and they said, I want a discussion with the business owner. I want the single points of failure to determine. Actually, and everyone told them, hey, you're going to ask for money. No. But when this risk materializes, the first thing you understand is who is the real owner of the system, because whose interests are affected. After the pandemic, after the beginning of 2022, this approach is quite applicable. It's been applied anywhere. In your environment, it is more practical, and for specific risks, for specific objectives, it may be very, very effective.
Ребята, кто будут говорить, пару слов буквально про себя, чтобы...
Just introduce yourself, because we want our audience to know. I'm Vladimir Shatshnayder. I'm Director of IT Audit and Data Analysis Department at Rostelecom. I first worked as an auditor and consultant in the Big Four, and now I work as an internal auditor and data analytic, and I've been at telecoms, I've been at Gazprom and others.
Ну я тоже представлюсь. Артем Горлов.
I'm Artem Gorlov.
Работал в сырьевых компаниях, начинал внешне.
I have worked in mining companies first as an external auditor, then internal auditor, consultant, Big Four, within the AFK Sistema perimeter, then audit committees, boards, and so on. Now I do investment.
Чтобы это было применимо, не просто рассказ, кто я такой. Я сейчас попробую на то, что вы рассказали, посмотреть с разных как бы вот сторон.
I'll try to give you a different view, a view of the user of this process that you're offering.
То, что это используется.
So the first thing is, many companies already use this in the IT, in the CB world. That's okay. That's very obvious. Your general idea was that you can use the same approach to operational risks. And I think that is a matter for a big discussion. Because there are some benefits, I'll talk to that, and there are some disadvantages that will prevent this from flying. The first big benefit of using this approach to testing operational risks, non-strategic risks, is that it gives you a multi-scenario view how a risk may evolve and how, therefore, the mitigation action plan may work. And this is a big difference. When I was head of risk management, I can tell you that it is very applicable, it is very useful, but it works more on operational risks. For example, a breakdown of the chain of supplies, of supply chain, and so on. And you can play various scenarios, and you can establish various strategies in order to respond to those scenarios. Now, I'm looking at this as a member of the audit committee. I'm happy that you have this approach, but this is not very good for testing such serious, closer to strategic risks, like business continuity risks. Because you or the team that is doing the testing, you may not know what's happening outside the company. You may not know how your competitors will respond to whatever you do. These are strategic things, and it is not what you're offering. I don't think it is applicable to the strategic format. In the operational environment, yes, I think it's relevant, and it could be applicable and useful. Russia, even for public companies, risk management is sometimes being done like a mere formality. It's not a tool that's always on the fingertips of the C guys. And I think this approach could make this operational risk management more useful. Well, I specifically spoke to that. To us, this approach is an add-on to what we already have. Of course, we understand that you can't cover all risks in this fashion. Of course, we're talking about a specific range of risks that can be covered by this. Strategic risks, risks for the financial performance, so this is a different story, of course. I don't think that it kind of clicks into place with what we are offering. On that, we agree. Well, the movement in the right direction is when you try to test a certain risk, you get a better understanding of its probability and which factors should be in place for the risk to materialize. Just try to shut down a data center. It's not easy. Well, in practice, we take any inadmissible event and we decompose it to micro scenarios. Even someone, plugging off a cable accidentally. And from that bottom, we move back to the top, to the risks of inadmissible events that are business continuity issues. And I'm just interested. And what is your top management saying when you say, what about shutting down internet for one day? Actually, this is the initiative of our top management. They say, so if there is no internet in the company, so we have 1,500 developers. Can they work without the internet? So this is a great buy-in from the management. They want at least to calculate how much it will cost the company. The idea of getting this buy-in, when we say that at least you need to understand what to do to shut down a data center, the idea is to get professionals into this testing team. They will not have to experiment. So if you want someone to do control delivery, you go and do control delivery in a professional way. But you don't let kind of a student with a screwdriver in the big IT things and leave them poking around. Of course not. Every industry is a mix of previous industries, new approaches, and so on. And we don't know who is going to do this practical testing. Maybe it shouldn't even be an internal function in the future. So if this starts to fly, this can go to, for example, professionals who know how to steal money from the company, how to deceive the treasury, how to shut down the internet, how to stop the company from operating.
Мне кажется, Владимир, вот то, что ты отмечаешь, да, важно отметить на последнем слайде.
It's important
про то, что не останавливая нормальную деятельность.
To respond to Vladimir,
То есть очень важно.
Irina said in her last slide that it's important not to stop the company from operating. The very fact of this dialogue is very important, and if they have buy-in from top management is already a very good thing. In the government, for example, the regulators require business centers to have at least one training evacuation per year in order to train for fire, for floods, and so on. So what Vladimir and I know better is a situation in which IT guys come to the business and say, we want to test the database, and the business says, no, we don't have any money for that. That's one story. But if the top management actually starts this ball rolling, I think it will provide certain results, maybe not strategic, but operational results. Anyway.
Те же айтишники, например,
But if you imagine a situation,
HP Blade Gen 11, 200 штук.
for example, maybe companies would want to buy 200 HP Blade 11 generations for backing up, but they just don't have the money, just don't have the resources. There is a general understanding that billing in telecoms are very important. It's billing, it's about money. But then you dig deeper and you think, so if we stop our billing functionality for a day, okay, so what's going to happen to our customers? Are they going to go away? We will not bill them for 1 year, but can we bill our customers on the next day? Yes, they will continue getting our services. Yes. So how much money are we going to actually lose? And is this money comparable to the hardware that we're going to buy in order to back up all our data centers? Maybe this money would be better spent for more critical systems. And if your approach is first understanding what events are really inadmissible, then you can go risk-based and you can redistribute your resources. And IT resources are frankly expensive. Russian servers with the same functionality, they cost more than foreign and they work a little bit less than foreign. So this is an operational approach, as Artem says, very, very good, but it tells you how to work with effectiveness and efficiency. And actually, there is a need for that in the business circles. Let's imagine a large company, a virtual large company, an oil company, okay? There are several governments working with this company, and we paid our IT guys for our servers. Maybe they are not that critical, but we have paid for them, and we're not going to give them away. But, so there are some fiefdoms within. But if the whole company takes a holistic view, and the company understands where its priorities lies, and Artyom, I think, as a member of the board of directors, looking at it kind of from the bird's view, he would be much happier that the whole company keeps functioning rather than a specific fiefdom within the company. And actually, when they start doing this, it starts working like this, and this depends just on the point of view.
Я немножко дополню коллег со стороны
A small addition to what's been
said. Председателя комитета по аудиту, независимого члена совета директоров крупной публичной компании.
As an independent director and head of the audit committee of a large public company, their paradigm is as follows. They are a public company, they have a risk map 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, and God forbid anyone to read it all. There are some people called risk managers, they're being paid, they are not poor people. Directors are not very expensive, less expensive than risk managers, but according to Russian law, they carry a lot of subsidiary liability. Not a very comfortable life, I can tell you. And they look at the risk map because ex officio, they need to understand the risk map. And this is where it becomes important. So I did a little bit of homework. I took your approach, and I see two novel elements there. One, it's pretty bold distinction between inadmissible events and everything else. And the second thing is that you need to be so confident that you have processes protecting you from inadmissible events that you can expose yourself to the market, announce bug bounties,
хакеров или вредителей, попытаться это
provide your data and expose yourself to a bunch of hackers, professional, non-professional, semi-professional, whatever. So I took our risk map and I tried to understand how can you apply this distinction between inadmissible event and everything else to our risk map. Of course, the standard philosophy also has this risk grading, but when I looked at that real world risk map, I did really change some of the cells on the map from the point of view of whether it is inadmissible really. So I can see some scientific truth in this distinction. Other risks that are challenging to test through bug bounties. So what is the overall use of the bug bounty testing approach? When you push the risk owners to exposing this risk to a non-controlled testing, not just statistical assessment, not just modeling and so on. If the C-level pushes them, the risk owner will wake up, they will look better, they will look deeper into looking at whether they are currently managing the risk in the right way. So the board of directors could push risk owners, maybe not all the way to bug bounties, but toward better looking at their own risk management mechanisms. It may work for IT, but for manufacturing companies, it would be pretty challenging to imagine how you do bug bounty in a manufacturing environment. You can, for example, tell a risk owner, for example, and they own an industrial risk. Okay, tomorrow we will have a bunch of people and we will ask them to hack into your system. Maybe they will wake up a little bit and they will take another look at their own system. So, where I see the benefits is improvement in the quality of risk management, and this is important to shareholders and to the top management. Understanding that the company really manages its risk, rather than caring only about their P&L. Right? Operational management does care about their P&L, and sometimes they try to masquerade doing nothing as real risk management. So this is a very big management problem, how to make sure that risk owners really do something about their risks, rather than report doing something about their risks. So I can see some scientific novelty here, both from the philosophic standpoint and from the operational standpoint. Maybe it's not applicable to manufacturing companies, maybe it's more applicable to IT, but I think if you think about this, you'll find uses for it.
Первый был тезис о том, что вводится, ну не то, что вводится, фокус внимания на недопустимых процессах. Your
first point was on which event is really inadmissible. But if you look at the risk management theory, you actually need to start with your risk appetite, with your risk tolerance. This actually brings us closer to... Yeah, but very few people actually move throughout this journey to the final, to the end. Maybe this could work. Yes, exactly. This is a philosophical approach. Everybody is okay talking about risk and consequences and so on and so forth. But if you press them against the wall, if you ask them, is it inadmissible? And if yes, then let's spend money. If no, let's not. It's important. It's an important point about philosophy, because the right risk management in any company is about not every top manager and not every member of the board of directors actually understands that risk management is a scientific thing, approaches, probabilities, and so on. Well, sometimes you talk to big managers about probability, and everybody is on a different page on what is medium probability, high probability, low probability, and so on. With this approach, I think you bring everyone into the same frame of reference. Inadmissible or not inadmissible? Is it fatal or not fatal? Are you ready to get tested or are you not? Well, this is a simplification of the management system, yes, but maybe this simplification is exactly what the management system needs. Because when you said this risk map kilometer by kilometer, I visualized it myself, exactly. We've all seen a map like this in many, many companies. I mean, simplifying this, making it more straightforward, when you open it up and you see that it's impossible to read, it's very hard to really understand what's important and what is not. When you concentrate it, when everyone agrees that these events are really inadmissible, this will translate into more effective action rather than, quarterly discussions. So yes, we have seen a new risk, but this is what happens in real life, you see? When people discuss a risk map in a public company, for example, you allocate 4 hours on this, and if you start with saying, okay, let's split into this and let's discuss only the important things, and managers actually resist that because they have not thought about this. They were asked to make a risk map. They created a risk map, but they did not even think about this. They never went to the end. Well, they wanted to include all the risks they can remember instead of concentrating on what's really important to the company. The managers want to talk about their pains. Please, board of directors, pay attention to me. Actually, the tool is diluted. But again, the board of management, the board of directors, at various stages of maturity of the company, they need to guide the management. First, you put together a holistic vision of the company, risks, and then you ask the management to actually look at each risk from the point of view of what's important. And this is why this is scientifically true. Well, again, even if you read these thick risk maps, then people start to talking in terms of Monte Carlo modeling and probabilities and how you assess the risk and so on. But if people try to model the risks that have never materialized, while we are modeling, these risks will materialize. Where we see the utility of our approach is that this approach is very quick and very flexible, and it can enable people focusing on things that can be lethal to the company. Well, Irina has said in the very beginning that it is an add-on. It is a good way to straighten up things that have been becoming more and more complex over the years, just because of that old lazy approach to risk management. Maybe if you made it applicable in your InfoSec security, that would be beneficial as well. Can I ask a question, actually, at a new level of this discussion? So you have a team which does the testing, and you have said that you already use this approach somewhere.
То кто эти команды? Это только, например, внутренние аудиторы.
Who are people who do this operational testing? Do you test only with your in-house people, or do you have external auditors? The tests that we are planning at this point are primarily focused on back-office processes, things like procurement and payments and so on. And that means that so far we have our own people to do that. We can go to guys who don't have a conflict of interest. We can take take people from other functions if we need some additional expertise for this testing. Of course, we are aware that the more complicated our tests become, the more general expertise would emerge that could be shared between companies. Well, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this process is more or less the same as pen test. Pen test of operational risks. But when you start pen testing, when you drill down, while first pen tests can be done by people with knowledge of simple injections and general knowledge of SQL, at some point you would need a team of high-class experts who first can get to root causes, to really root causes of things, and also, I mean, IT company may be lucky, but if you are in a manufacturing environment, you need to have such a team in each function. So the approach itself is useful, but are you going to find the people to do that? Well, such teams could be, could be quite general. I'll digress a little bit from this debate. We have a cyber battle between the red and the blue in a neighboring room. So the Reds attack, the blue, they defend, and they actually come into teams from around the industry. So people who work as defenders, they try to experiment with attacking, and vice versa. The general idea behind this is that actually we would have teams from all over the company. For example, you are a good IT guy. You know procurement very well. Of course, I'm speaking roughly. You need to tune this approach, but when you get together such a professional team, right, you might say, okay, a student with a screwdriver is not something that we particularly worry about, but if such guys try to hack into the company, that would be serious. If you look at it from the industry standpoint, from the member of the board of directors, this could be like, let's call this person who knows the industry. He may be from outside the company, but we don't want everyone from inside the company. So this is our vision. We try to do something on the inside, but as we have talked with risk guys, with auditors around the industry, of course, I think such teams could be representing the entire industry. Well, a professional team of sabotageurs who would actually try to shut everyone down. Good idea. Well, you said that you are starting from back office processes, and Andrey, in the beginning of the discussion, he said that this is his area of responsibility. So, who is defining which events are inadmissible? Andrey or CEO or head of function? Well, these IAs are defined or determined by the C-level. So there are 17 such IAs, and then we take each IA and decompose them to scenarios that can materialize in a specific function. Andrey's area of responsibility includes the back office scenarios that potentially, if they materialize, may lead to an inadmissible event, and that inadmissible event was predetermined from the C-level. Each AI, well, we are very cross-functional, and some of the IAs may touch Andrey's zone of responsibility, and some IAs may be particularly in development. Yes, these are cross-business things that can start hitting in one portion of the business, and then it should go to other portions of the business. So all IAs should be born of the consolidated position of our business and board of directors.
Когда аудит предоставляет
I think it's the same thing as when auditors provide a map of assurances for risks. So this can be translated into 17 key risks for the companies. And if auditors came to the board of directors and said, yes, dear board of directors, so we will test these 6 out of 17 this year, those 6 out of 17 next year, and so on. So as we transform this function, this audit function, we actually discuss this. When an auditor looks at a risk map, they actually want everything covered, but you have an understanding that with particular risks, you come to the board of directors and say, I want this risk covered, and they will tell you, okay, we have this risk on the risk map, but it's not actually important. So a company concentrating on something that's important and auditors actually assuring board of directors that there are certain single points of failure that will not work, and so on and so forth, there would be some utility in this. Okay, let me wear another hat. I'm not an internal auditor anymore, okay? So I can afford saying this. You will be left carrying the bag if you have provided assurances against a certain risk, but the risk has materialized. Of course, you will say that an auditor cannot be, cannot bear the responsibility. Of course, that's understood. Legally, you will be protected. But the next step would be, the board of directors will say, first, include that in her KPIs. Well, we have our own risks, but there are two scenarios. If we kind of keep the old approach, they will not come to us, and at some point they will come to us and say, and why are you actually getting salary in this company? So I think if you think strategically, what's worse? I think it's worse not to do anything. Of course, there is the risk that you have provided a commitment, right? And this can be fired back at you, right? But you have participated as a tester, you went through those scenarios and so on. This will fire back at you. Well, of course, if you have more power, you get more responsibility. If we provide guarantees, we really need to be held accountable for the guarantee of your tests. Well, if this is your KPI, then it may affect your impartiality, right? Because you may be too careful. Well, this challenges your autonomy and independence, right? Well, at positive, if we are too loyal, if we don't find anything untoward, then people will start asking questions. So right now, we don't have a disciplinary component. We do this testing not to punish someone, not to, fine someone or whatever. We do it to become better. And this ideology is actually best insurance against us not covering up things. Well, the current frame of reference is still work in progress. So I think it's a very important thing. When we do pin tests, we start thinking about the independence of pin testers at a very early point. And I think it will be the same here. The more scenarios you actually test, the more pathways you find to an inadmissible event, the better, because you actually demonstrate where we are exposed. And if someone who knows their procurement can't find any pathways to an IA, actually this situation will make the shareholders happy and so on, but tomorrow they will find something. This approach is very different, I think, for companies using modern technology, modern IT in many, many ways. And it may be very different for low automation and offline companies. On the one hand, automation is complex, automation makes you more exposed, but automation can make you more protected too. So we want to be as protected as possible. We want to protect the people who do the test. And we always say to managers, if they find a vulnerability in your process, it's good. You're not going to be punished for that. However, there are public commitments, right? These commitments, they go all the way to the board of directors and maybe to the general public. And actually, if a student with a screwdriver actually can hack into your payment system, that's a problem, of course. So, of course, there are some challenges. I think if you're aware of those and if you think about what to do about them, it's not impossible. Okay. We have some time for questions. Irina will check the questions online. We have someone raising their hand here in the room.
У меня вопрос, наверное, практический. Вот если вы говорите о недопустимом событии,
so you're talking about an inadmissible event, and you do testing in the same sentence. So my question is, has this test gone all the way to the materialization of an inadmissible event? So you think that a certain vulnerability will lead to an inadmissible event, but maybe there are some other processes, human factor, which will prevent this vulnerability from materializing. So does it make any sense about logically about talking about an inadmissible event and testing it? And if you test it, is it really inadmissible? So the key issue, have you really inside positive, have you really tested all the way towards an inadmissible event? Or maybe you started testing and then you came to a point when the materialization is really inadmissible and you say, no, it's inadmissible, so we're not doing that. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Ну, такой масштабный инструмент нужно использовать точно умелыми руками и там с пониманием того.
Well, the first thing everyone needs to understand that such a potent tool should be used wisely, and of course, it shouldn't spin out of control.
Сценарии тестирования, о которых Ирина рассказывала, да, это там большое дело их сформулировать. То есть сценарий.
And this is why the testing scenarios are very important. Starting a test, especially multi-step and multi-layer test without a scenario, without a stop word, I think you really need to understand well what you're doing. Why we think that we can stop before it's too late, because we have experience in so-called resultative cybersec. We have a lot of customers in the information security world, and of course we understand that the approach itself actually stops short of pressing the red button and crushing the company. At Positive, we are at the following stage. We have said that our management determines 17 inadmissible events, and there is a fundamental agreement among all top managers. Sometimes within the company, not all people actually share the sense of inadmissibility. At Positive, we already share. Of course, you always have to ask yourself a question: are you really sure that all these scenarios have been played through? And when you ask this question to managers, you understand that 2/3 of those scenarios can really end in an inadmissible event, and therefore the management says, no, let's not start this. But where such tests are possible, we model these scenarios, how we get to point X. But I think of certain things that we can talk about in public. We have a public test of delivering bad code into our products and monetary embezzlement. These are public tests, and we do a bug bounty on a copy of our infrastructure. And with that copy, you can experiment with all your might. So, malware introduced into our products. What I'm talking about? We have a lot of defensive products. There is a lot of code that's updated, and if some malware is injected and it starts replicating all over the place, this is an inadmissible event because it will end in the theft of data, it will end in loss of customers, and so on. So we have stated a price of 60 million. There is a bug bounty. And we use a copy, an exact copy of our system. So this bug bounty has been around for 1 year for theft and half a year for the injection of malware. 5 seconds. 5 seconds, okay? I mean, it's a burning question. Okay, let me wear another hat. You say that your company is positive. However, your attitude to risk is negative, right? Because risk is kind of could be bad, could be good. So you only look at the negative side of the risk, yes? Well, not exactly. This approach that we are discussing, it's an add-on to classic risk management. The company always looks at the lost opportunities and so on. This is a parallel story. We're not actually saying, okay, everything is going to be bad and let's build our risk management system around this. Okay. Sorry for digressing. Okay, we have 5 questions. A question from Anton. what is the value of probability at which your AI is impossible, is considered impossible? Well, each AI comes with a bunch of scenarios, and if those scenarios were not materializable during the tests, we think that such an AI is impossible. And this testing is online. It's just like a bug bounty. At any moment, you can test this inadmissible event. So, if in 2 years no one could steal money from us, the money that could be stolen safely means our system works, okay? And I'm trying to formulate this. There is a cost to any action. So if you have 1 million rubles on the other side, people will not break into it. 60 million rubles, people will not break into it. If there is more money, maybe some more professional people will emerge and they will do this. But you need to understand how much value is there. I think that's returning to more classic risk management practices. And when colleagues make this distinction between truly inadmissible and everything else, I think you don't talk about probabilities anymore. Yes, exactly. When we discussed this approach, at first we always asked ourselves, and what is the probability? What is the probability? And then we decided that we don't need any probabilities. If we were able to break into the system, it's bad. If we were not able to break into the system, it's good. Next question. I think it's a question on one of my slides, so I'll go back to it.
Так, вопрос, почему определение сценариев реализации НС идет после шага формирования защиты? Насколько эффективен такой подход?
How effective is your approach that your scenarios are formulated after you create the protection system? Well, I think it's quite logical because our protection system is crafted around an inadmissible event. Which scenario we're going to use to make this inadmissible event materialize, that is our choice. And there is a choice of scenarios. After managers have said, okay, we have the protection in place and this inadmissible event will not materialize, then we start testing it. I don't know whether I answered this question.
Недопустимые события, нет никакой защиты вообще в данный момент.
Well, you've been in the market for quite some time. You should have protection. Well, but yes, I understand. But we're talking about the general description of this approach. If someone decides to do it from scratch, I'm just explaining how it works technically. So protection comes first. So this is the ideology behind this. The goal behind the story is to try to collect as many possible scenarios as possible. After managers say we have protection in place, we try to think of a scenario that circumvents this protection. So at the third step, you start becoming creative. When you invite a person who has an outside view of the company and they see their protection, sometimes they can come up with such scenarios that businesses just can't think of. There's another question. What are our inadmissible events? Yeah, a good question, by the way. Well, you can start with our bug bounty programs. Malware injection and theft. On the operational level, I can make some examples. It's a potential loss of rights to our intellectual property, it's loss of key people. So stories like that. I'm making rough examples, of course.
Был по поводу принципа формирования Red Team, да, вот по независимости, в каком подразделении эти команды там. Но мне кажется, мы про это.
So this was a question about teams. Yes, we have spoken to that, and that actually is all.